Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. I gave the house to my daughter, and she said, "Now I don't need you anymore, go away." But 3 days later. My name is Margaret Holmes. I am 68 years old today, and my entire life has been woven around two defining roles, mother and wife. I was born and raised in a small town in North Carolina, in a simple but loving family. My parents, who were modest but honest people, taught me the value of work, respect, and sacrifice. I have always wanted to honor them, but it was especially in becoming a mother that I discovered the depth of self-giving. I met my husband, Peter, when we were still teenagers. He was sweet, funny, and had that tender look in my eyes that made me melt. We married very young, full of dreams and hopes. For years, we patiently built our life. Peter worked as a carpenter, while I took care of the house and our daughter, Rachel, born 3 years after our marriage. Then, 30 years ago, life changed abruptly. Peter fell ill, quickly and without warning, taken by a disease even doctors struggled to understand. Within months, he was gone, leaving me alone with 6-year-old Rachel. It was the hardest blow I'd ever suffered, but I had to hold on for her. I had to learn to be both mother and father, protector and supporter, comforter and disciplinarian. The house the three of us lived in, my family before the tragedy, was an old Victorian building that my grandparents had bought at the beginning of the last century. Every plank of wood, every brick, every window told a story. The house had survived wars, storms, joys and sorrows, and it still housed the breath of our ancestors today. For me, this house was more than just a refuge from the elements. It was a sanctuary filled with precious memories. I remembered the children's laughter echoing through the great room, the winter evenings spent by the fireplace, the smell of freshly baked cookies my mother baked in the kitchen. It was the silent witness to my first steps, my marriage, Rachel's first smile, every moment I had been both strong and vulnerable. Rachel, my only daughter, grew up under this roof, with the same quiet strength I had tried to instill in her. From a very young age, she was curious, passionate about books, about justice, about the world. I remember the nights she would ask me to read her stories about heroes, lawyers, and courageous women. She wanted to change the world, I could feel it. And I always encouraged her, even when it meant she would be far away from me. She became a brilliant lawyer, an ambitious and independent woman. I followed her journey with pride and sometimes with a touch of concern. Life never gave her anything, but she had this gentle rage to succeed, to prove that she could accomplish anything. I did everything I could to ensure she lacked nothing, sleepless nights preparing her meals, savings made at the cost of small sacrifices, constant encouragement. Then one day, Rachel came back. With her husband, Ethan, a quiet and gentle man, and their little girl, Lily, a child full of life and crystalline laughter. She wanted to come back and live in the family home, at least for a while. I welcomed this idea with immense happiness, delighted to return to the joyful tumult of a house full of children. I gave up my room to Lily, prepared a small space for her, and agreed to move into the attic, which was dusty and dark, but which became my refuge. One summer evening, as the heavy heat of the day began to dissipate and the sky took on pink and orange hues, Rachel came to find me in the small corner I had created under the roof. This attic, with its exposed beams and dim light, had become my refuge, my sanctuary in this large house where everything had changed. She sat across from me, her face lit by the soft light of a lamp, and for the first time in a long time, she looked serious, almost anxious. I could sense a mixture of hesitation and determination in her eyes. "Mom," she began softly, as if each word cost her. "I've been asking myself questions lately. About the house, about us, about the future." I listened to her in silence, my heart beating a little faster, because I felt that what she was going to say was not trivial. "You know, it would be simpler if the house were in my name," she explained, her eyes searching mine to gauge my reaction. "If anything ever happens to you, it would avoid complications, paperwork, arguments. It would be safer for everyone." I nodded. I understood, of course. She was right from a practical point of view. But there was a new inflection in her voice, a firmness I hadn't seen before. It was a hard, almost impatient tone, which made me shiver. I looked at her for a long time, and still felt a pang in my heart. "You mean I should give it to you, huh?" She smiled. A smile I hadn't seen often in recent years, a cold, almost calculating smile, but also filled with a kind of conviction that she seemed to want to convey to me. "Yes, Mom. I mean, you've had it all your life, but I'm the one who lives here, I'm the one who takes care of the house, the family. It would make sense for it to be mine now." The words hit me like a crashing wave. I was torn between the weight of the past, of my memories, and the present reality. Between the fear of losing this home that had always been my refuge, and the immense love I had for my daughter, this love that pushed me to want to trust her, to give her what was most precious to me. I knew this gesture meant a lot. More than just a formality. It was a passage, a turning point. I felt my hands become sweaty, my breath become short, but I gathered all my courage and said, "Very well, Rachel. If that's what you think is best." With the help of a notary, I signed the papers a few weeks later. The house officially passed into his name. A mixture of apprehension and pride washed over me. I thought I was giving him a gift, a gesture of love, without imagining that it would change everything between us. The next day, everything changed. I still remember that morning with painful clarity, as if time had frozen in those precise moments. It was beautiful. The sun pierced through the attic shutters, drawing golden lines on the worn wooden floor. I had gone downstairs early, as usual, to make coffee. The house was still asleep, peaceful. I put the kettle on, grabbed my favorite mug, the one Rachel had given me for Mother's Day 10 years ago, and sat down at the kitchen table, listening to the birds sing through the half-open window. I was slowly sipping my black coffee, enjoying the quiet, when I heard her footsteps descending the stairs from the first floor. It was Rachel. She entered the kitchen, her face tense, her arms crossed. There was an icy hardness in her gaze, something I hadn't seen before. A heavy silence fell before she spoke. "Mom, we need to talk," she said curtly. I sat up, surprised. "Sure, what is it?" She glanced quickly toward the living room, then sighed as if carrying an invisible burden. "Look. I can't keep you here anymore. Ethan and I need some space. You understand, right? It's not against you, but you're too present." His words hit me hard. "Too present?" I repeated, confused. "What do you mean by that?" She avoided my gaze, as if she knew what she was saying hurt me. "It's simple, Mom. Now that the house is mine, I own it. And I think it's time for you to leave. This isn't your home anymore." I stood there frozen. Silence fell over the room like a leaden blanket. I felt a lump in my throat. My hands around the cup began to tremble. The heat of the coffee suddenly became unbearable against my palm. "You want me to leave? To leave the house? Our house? The one where you grew up, where your father died, where I raised you?" She looked away, uncomfortable but firm. "Yes. You could go to Aunt June's for a while. Or maybe look for a suitable nursing home. It would be better for everyone." I felt a dull ache lodge in my chest. It wasn't just the rejection that hurt, it was the coldness, the indifference with which she spoke these sentences. As if I had become a cumbersome object, to be moved when it took up too much space in the decor. I said nothing. No words came to me. My mind was buzzing. I looked around me, at the kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals, at the fireplace where we had hung Christmas stockings, at the hallway where Rachel had taken her first steps. Everything suddenly seemed foreign, stolen, closed off. I slowly climbed the stairs to the attic. Each step creaked like a cruel reminder of my years spent there. I took a modest bag, a few clothes, 2 photo albums, a blanket my mother knitted, and the wooden box where I kept Peter's letters. Nothing more. The rest I left behind. Too heavy, too empty now. On my way back downstairs, I passed Ethan in the hallway. He glanced at me briefly, clearly embarrassed, but he said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. I glanced one last time at the frame hanging by the front door, a photo of me, Rachel, and Peter by the lake, all three of us smiling, carefree. I left without looking back. The warm summer wind caressed my face as I closed the door behind me. It didn't slam. It closed gently, almost reverently, as if the house itself understood my pain. I had nowhere to go. Not that day. Just my car, my bag, and a gaping hole in my heart. I drove aimlessly, my hands clenched on the steering wheel, tears blurring my vision. I was a mother whose own daughter had just driven away. And I didn't yet know that this rejection was just the beginning of a twist Rachel would never forget. The 3 days following my departure were the darkest of my entire life. And yet, I had known the pain of grief, the loneliness of widowhood, the silent struggles of single motherhood. But nothing had prepared me for this form of abandonment. This cold and total rejection, coming from my own daughter, the one I had carried, nurtured, protected, and loved unconditionally. I slept in my car, an old Honda Civic, parked on the edge of a deserted park. At night, the leather seats became icy cold, and despite the blankets I'd hastily grabbed, the cold penetrated my bones. I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump, every memory tore me apart. I spent my days wandering the streets, my eyes empty, my heart heavy. Sometimes I sat on benches in a square, watching children play, couples laugh, passers-by go about their business, as if everyone was moving on except me. I felt invisible. A 68-year-old woman, thrown out like a stranger, with only her grief for company. I remember one evening, the second I think, when I burst into tears in my car. I had no more tears, only dry, heart-rending sobs that echoed against the steamy windows. I spoke to myself. How did I get into this? How could my own daughter do this to me? But no answer came. Just silence. Thick. Cruel. And then, on the third day, as I was about to park behind a gas station for the night, my phone rang. The screen read, Rachel. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated. I almost didn't answer. But part of me still hoped she'd changed her mind. I picked up. Her voice was unrecognizable. Broken. Panicked. She was breathing heavily, as if she had just run or cried. Mom, you have to come back. There are people at the house, police officers. They say the house isn't really mine. That the transfer is invalid. Can you explain to me what's going on? I closed my eyes. I knew. She had just discovered the truth. What she didn't know was that when I agreed to sign over the house, I also took precautions. I wasn't naive. A longtime friend, Gloria, had recommended an old notary known for his honesty and discretion. He had taken the time to listen to me, to understand my situation, and especially my doubts, those I didn't dare express out loud. Together, we included a lifetime usufruct clause. This meant that, yes, Rachel had received ownership on paper, but the actual and full enjoyment of the house remained mine until my death. And more, an additional clause had been added, discreetly but legally irrefutably. If I were ever evicted, neglected, or abused by the new owner, the house would be automatically taken away and transferred to a non-profit foundation I had secretly created. A foundation dedicated to providing shelter to elderly women who were homeless or rejected by their families. This project was my silent legacy. Rachel hadn't read anything in detail. She'd simply signed, convinced that her mother was offering her the house unconditionally. And now, reality had hit her. I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. Mom, please come back. Tell them it's a mistake. I need you. I need us to fix this together. I was silent for a few seconds. My heart was pounding. I was torn between pain and justice. She had betrayed me, but she was still my daughter. Rachel, you kicked me out, remember? You told me this wasn't my place anymore. I know, I know. I was horrible. But I didn't know. I thought that. She was unable to finish her sentences. I sighed deeply. I'm coming. But not to save you. To make you understand. There are some things you can't get back so easily. I hung up. Then I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were tired, my face hollow, but a new flame had been rekindled within me. The flame of dignity. I wasn't just a helpless old woman. I was Margaret Holmes. Mother. Widow. And builder of her own respect. When I got home, the air felt charged with electricity, as if the very walls vibrated with restrained tension. The sun was beating down that day, but in the living room, the atmosphere was icy. Rachel sat on the sofa, her shoulders hunched, her eyes puffy. Her gaze avoided mine. She was no longer the tough, confident woman of the other morning. She was a disoriented child, trapped in the consequences of her own actions. Ethan, meanwhile, was standing by the bay window, his arms crossed. He looked more withdrawn, angrier. Not at me, no. At the situation. Maybe at Rachel too. He didn't understand how it all got so out of hand so quickly. He didn't exactly greet me, but he bowed his head slightly, out of respect, or perhaps guilt. I walked in unhurriedly, upright and dignified. I was wearing a crisp white blouse, ironed the day before in the laundromat of a women's shelter where I had spent a few hours. I was tired, but I walked calmly. I didn't want to come back as a victim, but as a woman who had regained control of her story. I sat down in front of them, calmly, and spoke, gently, but firmly. This house, Rachel, is not just a building. It is not real estate, nor is it something to be passed down like a worthless jewel. It is my past, my history, my roots. This is where I knew love, where I buried your father, where I saw you born, take your first steps, fall, get up, grow. Do you understand what that represents? It is not a title you put on a piece of paper. Rachel slowly raised her head. Her cheeks were wet with silent tears. You asked me for this house thinking I was giving it all to you. And you thought that gave you the right to reject me. To erase me. But you forgot one thing, Rachel. A house is worthless without love. You can repaint it, change the furniture, renovate the stairs, but if it's empty of soul, it becomes a tomb. She burst into tears. A deep, choked, almost animal-like sob. She curled up on the couch, racked with shame, regret, and sadness. Ethan looked away, uncomfortably, then left without a word, leaving us alone. I was selfish, she said finally. I thought I was taking control of my life. But I forgot that you are my foundation. My rock. I forgot everything you'd done for me. I looked at her for a long time, my heart broken but lucid. I handed her a handkerchief, without touching her. I can't come back and live here, Rachel. What you destroyed, it's not just a shared roof. It's a bond of trust. And that takes time to rebuild. She nodded, unable to speak further. A few weeks later, after finalizing the procedures, I made the most difficult, but rightest, decision. I activated the termination clause, and the house was officially transferred to the association I had founded. The Forgotten Hearts, a structure designed to house elderly women abandoned, rejected, humiliated by their families, like me. The house was to become a warm, lively reception center, vibrant with stories and real love. I left without hatred, but with inner peace. I moved into a small apartment on the second floor of a building with light walls, with a window overlooking a community garden. The living room is small, but bathed in light. There's a bookcase, a comfortable armchair, and a painting of Peter on the wall. I've recreated a new home. For me. Today, I've rebuilt myself. I give talks at community centers. I write columns for a small local newspaper about aging, resilience, and the dignity of women. I also lead a talking circle for wounded mothers, where we sometimes cry, but above all, we heal. And Rachel? She's changed. Slowly, but truly. She calls me, often. She sometimes comes with Lily, who runs into my living room and calls me Grandma with bright laughter. Rachel no longer talks about home. She talks about memories. About forgiveness. She's learning to love me differently. And me? I forgave her. Because a mother's love doesn't fade, it transforms. It becomes wiser, stronger, freer. But I also know that some wounds, even forgiven ones, leave their mark. And I live with them. Not as a shameful scar, but as proof that I survived, and that from now on, I live for myself.